So here we go. A little beginning before the stream starts. Ooh. Turn that off for a second. Okay, it looks like sending. I'll wait till I see it showing here. And it is.
Alright everyone, it's time for the occult video 152, The Beast of Gévaudan, a sort of a spooky story from the mid-1700s in France. If you ever get a chance, watch the movie Brotherhood of the Wolf. You should watch the English version. It's actually very good. It's better with the English dub than in French with English subtitles. Now, disclaimer, there's some nudity in the movie and blood and violence and stuff like that. So some of you are a little bit too young for that stuff. You know, who really cares? But Tipper Gore cares. But The Beast of Gévaudan in literature, as far as the more academic side, we're not talking Hollywood now, is actually still quite a spooky story. And a lot of the explanations people throughout time have put forward for the phenomenon don't make sense. Now, long story short, in the 1760s, in early Enlightenment France, you got a rash of wolf attacks on numerous civilians at the time. A large number of people over the course of 3 years were killed and maimed, supposedly by one abnormally large wolf. According to the authorities at the time, that's what they suspected was happening, or perhaps a pack of wolves, or a rabid animal, a feral dog, or something like that. None of these make any sense. Wolf packs do not typically attack people, certainly not for that period of time. We do have some semi-modern literature to suggest sporadically that could happen. It's possible that a wolf pack, technically, it got too used to being around these towns, sort of took up residence, scavenged, got a little too friendly with humans, and then some of the older members that no longer could hunt other more able prey just decided to start dragging off humans, essentially. But that doesn't appear to be reflected. If we look at tales of wolf attacks where a population of wolves has become a little too chummy with humans, you know, the little kids were mushrooming and they threw the steak to the wolves, and you know, how majestic and just wonderful. There are several modern counterparts from Russian literature from the 50s and 60s especially, as well as literature from Canada, I believe, that suggests that this can happen, but typically how this happens is it just doesn't fit in with the Beast of Gévaudan sort of situation. In those situations, generally very small children are the only ones being dragged off. The Beast of Gévaudan also dragged off adult males and attacked people in broad daylight. Even the first attack, I believe, was a woman who was minding her cattle, and the cattle ended up driving off whatever this particular animal in that case was. The description given in all of the accounts doesn't fit a wolf. In my opinion, it fits a hyena. What I think happened, here's my hypothesis. Around that time, French aristocrats, traveling maybe, or sending people to travel to these colonial regions they were beginning to inhabit, met all sorts of animals that they had only seen in books, and they assumed that they were otherworldly and very cool and fun to hang out with. It would be something to show all the ladies at the court, essentially. Hey, get into my pants. Look what I just got from the African colonies here. It's called a hyena. Isn't it cool? It poops white poop because it eats bones. Isn't that morbid? Haha, I'm a libertine. Something like that. Some aristocrat, I think, thought it was a good idea to bring back a hyena or a couple hyenas or maybe like a lion cub from Africa. And in the former case, they said, well, this animal's more aggressive than I thought. I think I'll just, like, leave it outside the gate, and it'll go in the woods. It'll die, because this isn't Africa. We have cold winters. It'll die. And then it didn't die for some years to come and began killing people because all of the normal prey species were absent. It was not able to adapt readily, and what I think happened is it was probably scavenging trash on the fringes of one or more of these towns, got too familiar with humans being around, said, these are slow animals. They don't even notice I'm here. I'll start eating them. You know, it just makes sense. And that's an entirely plausible theory. They did have contact with these regions in which they would have been encountering hyenas, lions, and things of that nature. And through other colonial endeavors, they could have acquired a tiger or anything like that, or an Alaskan brown bear. Thankfully, there appear to have been no mass attacks by such animals. The other possibility is sort of the gators in the sewer explanation, which is essentially somebody brought back a lion cub, something comparable to that. And then they realize that they get a lot bigger than little, fuzzy-wuzzy, roly-poly little lion cub. They said, it bit my wife yesterday. I gotta do something about it because otherwise I can't get this orgy on tonight. She's gonna be mad at me. I think I'll just leave it outside the gates. Or, another possibility, some of these aristocrats were essentially chickens that didn't want to go to a foreign land to go hunting because, I might get mauled or something. I'll just have them bring back a couple interesting animals and I'll let them free on the grounds and I'll hunt them here with all my manservants and maidservants. Stand over there, woman. You're the bait. When it comes, I'll blow its head off. And then realized too late that a juvenile lion can leap great distances, that hyenas are capable of jumping and climbing over obstacles, and it escaped. Now, who's going to tell the authorities, oh yeah, I brought back this animal from the colony, only it escaped and it's now in the woods. Sorry about that. Because then under their laws of the time, they're going to be the ones expending the money to hire people to kill it. If it kills anyone, it's not going to be the crown shelling out. The crown paid several individuals for fending off creatures throughout time when there were attacks by some vicious wolf or something like that. No, then the noble would have to shell out. Well, that wouldn't be good because they're already having problems with that king dude over there. They didn't want to have the whole crown come crashing down on their heads, so they just didn't say anything. Oh, the only people that know that I've got this animal are like my servants. They're not going to say anything. They just live here at my chateau, and they don't even really mix with the general population. You shut up or I fire you. Or you shut up or I sell you into slavery or something like that. I'll send you to Africa. I'll give you over to the military. I'll dispose of you in my employ and I'll give you over to the crown for indentured servitude or something like that. And so what I think is the most likely explanation is that the eventual animal that they killed that ended the attacks, that they describe as being disfigured, the way they describe it sounds a lot like a hyena. They're describing it as a wolf, but they're saying, yeah, but it has like a stripe down its back and it's kind of hunched over, shorter snout, weird little tail. It sounds like a hyena, honestly, or possibly a juvenile lion. It doesn't sound like a wolf in any way, shape, or form. It also doesn't sound particularly like a wolf-dog hybrid. Now, that's the other possibility. A very large dog, maybe a mastiff, breeding with a wolf, gives rise to an offspring that is marginally dog-like enough to live among humans to some extent without being too noticed until it's very large. Runs out of stuff to scavenge, picks off some chickens here and there and people get worried a bit and then starts attacking humans that it's used to, that it knows is generally non-aggressive towards it, so it doesn't fear them. This wouldn't, though, explain why after being hunted for several years it continued in that endeavor. It wouldn't really explain it. Unless it was messed up and sick, in which case you would expect people would have noted that. Nobody noted that this animal or these animals were emaciated or acting crazy like rabid. Rabies certainly wouldn't fit. You wouldn't get attacks for that long a period of time. You would need numerous animals. They would have to more or less explicitly be targeting humans. That's not what happens during a rabies outbreak. The animal, going mad, will attack people more or less at random in whatever order it encounters them. It's hungry. It's also got the tendency to bite on any object that comes near it that moves, or inanimate objects in many cases when it's in the rage period of rabies, for a few days, and then it succumbs. It's no longer able to attack anybody because it's having seizures and falls into a coma and dies. So rabies definitely doesn't fit. Wolf definitely doesn't fit. Wolf-dog hybrid fits a little bit, but I think the best explanation of this interesting cryptozoological phenomenon is probably an exotic animal imported from one of the French colonies that people had difficulty describing because they had never seen such an animal. They had never really quantified it to academic standards. And so if they see a hyena, they think, oh, it's a deformed wolf. If they see a lion, maybe their first inclination is it's a strange, deformed canid of some sort that's been like transmogrified by witchcraft. And that's really how they saw the world. So it is a cult in the sense that it's a cult and paranormal, in the sense that this animal has not been fully described. We don't know exactly what it is, but those would be the, in my opinion, the best fitting hypotheses. Lion or hyena. To a lesser extent, a wolf-dog hybrid that simply had no significant fear of humans, was sort of kind of raised on the outskirts of urbanization and was scavenging among humans for some time before it began to act up. Perhaps maybe there was a chicken farm there and it was sustaining itself by picking off some chickens, and then the chicken farm goes away, and then it doesn't know where it's going to get food, so it just starts attacking humans. That wouldn't be easily explained by the first attack, though. The very first attack was of a young girl minding her cattle, and the cattle drove this animal off. And she describes it as thus, striped down its back, wolf, but larger, kind of crazy looking with a short snout. It sounds more like a hyena. It doesn't even really sound like a lion. It wouldn't explain why the lion would be driven off by the cattle so easily. It attacks, it gets driven back, attacks again, then wanders off. It also wouldn't explain why then there's a lapse between that attack and the next. It sounds more like the behavior of a hyena that's sort of testing its limits, sort of testing its surroundings to see, what am I actually able to eat here? Because I'm not used to any of these other things. It could have been acquired as a cub and have no real instinct of how to hunt beyond its most central level, and be operating based on cause and effect. And of course, once it realized humans went down fairly easily, it had no reason to hunt anything other than humans. That would explain as well the ability to go fairly decent periods between attacks. Predatory instances, that is, consuming food, would fit with a hyena too. I think that general period of time between attacks wouldn't really be so indicative of a lion. You would expect maybe fewer attacks, actually, with one of those. And you wouldn't expect it to occasionally partially consume something and then wander off. A lion would easily consume a whole human being in a short period of time. Some of these people had their guts torn out, otherwise had not apparently been fed upon. That would indicate something that was not monstrously large, that had to consume the whole human and then wander off. They did kill a bunch of wolves, but the attacks continued. If it were rabies related and it had found a temporary reservoir in wolves, you would have expected that they would have eliminated it on the first couple of hunts. They killed so many animals. It would have thinned the population out. The epidemic would have died out fairly quickly. It wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. That's about all. Peace out.
Check. 1, 2, 3. puff, puff, pass, Fernando. Many years it's been since I saw a reefer in your hand. Did you find the bomb, Fernando? That dandy little glass one you got outside of Disneyland. I can see it in your eyes. You wanna try to steal across like the Rio Grande. No, Tommy Chong made it, man. He's not here. It was years ago, Fernando, when we met in Tijuana at a swank resort hotel. Maybe it was Acapulco. You worked the bar, Fernando. You were really well connected to the Zetas, I heard tell. And it was tattooed up and down your arms, that wide variety of chemicals you sell. And that's enough of that. I only did that just to keep something playing while I was away from the computer. Sticks, Hex, and Hammer. Heck of a YouTuber.
Alright everyone, it's time for Vermont Issues Episode 4, the NIMBY White-Collar Class of New England.
Only reason I'm even putting these videos into this particular stream is he's just started this series, the Vermont Issues one. It's funny because Vermont issues are very much Canadian issues.
The segment of the population that really wants social reform but not anywhere near them. And this is a common feature, I think. It's one of the things that New Englanders need to own up to a little bit. Those that have perhaps made it, as opposed to those that are like in the working class or something, less averse to these things. What you get in Vermont, out-of-staters may not always comprehend this. This is sort of the nanny state component, sort of like the Maryland approach of people living in this region. There are people in this state who will tell you, for instance, we need green energy. Climate change is a huge problem. We need renewables. We need wind farms, especially. For some reason, people here are convinced that solar won't work in our climate, like, despite all evidence to the contrary, and we need to scarify our hillsides with windmills. And every time people talk about wind farms, this has happened over and over. It's like, I can't remember which township it was. For like 10 years, they fought having a wind farm nearby. People are telling them, well, you'll pay less in electricity. It's renewable. You don't have to worry about the whole Vermont Yankee thing because you'll be generating your own power. And it's all good. Well, what's the problem? They said, well, we don't want it where they're proposing it. The prime location that they identified for the wind farm would have been within view of a lot of these landowners, and they didn't want to look at windmills. They didn't want to see windmills on the hill nearby. It would be not so scenic. Part of me understands that. One of the big tourist draws of our state is it happens to be scenic. Wind power does have its own complications. For instance, chopping birds' heads off. Not necessarily the greatest thing that could go wrong with a power source.
It's an interesting claim he's made there. There's actually studies being conducted on whether or not wind farms have a negative impact on local bird populations.
As opposed to like a nuclear meltdown or a coal seam fire. But I understand why some people would be upset, but the big thing that they had a problem with wasn't the environmental impact or, you know, erosion on the hillside or anything like that. It was, we don't want to look at the windmills. Put them elsewhere.
Yeah.
Where are you supposed to put them? Addiction treatment, another great example. This happens too. We want a new addiction treatment center. Oh, you're putting it there? We don't want it anymore. It's too close to our home. We're afraid that some addict is going to attack our kids or something like that. Like there aren't people that are addicted wandering around in your neighborhood anyway. Considering the percentage of the U.S. public that's addicted to opiates alone, statistically speaking, in the Rutland metro area alone, there should be about 250, 300 people that are addicted to opiates. And we're a small town community. And that's assuming that the very, very lowballed estimate of opiate addiction, as far as people that are willing to admit they have an addiction problem, that's assuming that that's realistic. I'm here to tell you, I don't believe it for a second. I think it's twice that. I think it's closer to 3 or 4% of the U.S. population that's at least somewhat addicted to opiates. I think when you roll all the other forms of addiction up, you're getting a good you know, 5 or 6% of the population that's addicted to something that's considered illicit. That doesn't even take into consideration alcoholism. It doesn't even take into consideration people that are under an active prescription. They're addicted, but they keep getting it refilled, and so they don't really fall under that general umbrella for statistical purposes. Yeah, it's a lot more people than... somebody was telling me that the opiate addiction crisis was some sort of a ruse by the government to increase immigration. Oh, we want to bring people in that, you know, they're not addicted, or because of economic reasons or something. How did those two things correlate whatsoever? And they said, oh, it's only like 1%, 1.5% of the population that's addicted to these things. Okay, so millions of people are addicted in this country to this specific class of material. And you're not even just talking about that, you're talking about others. And we try to build an addiction treatment center. It's the same idea as building a jail. Everyone agrees the jail is overcrowded. We need better conditions, and we need to modernize things, expand it. We need a new treatment plant for sewage. We need a new this. We need a new that. We need better road systems, but don't put the road near me. We need a new park, but it shouldn't be here. We need new anything, and people don't want it around them. Now, this isn't just a problem in Vermont. I'm not saying that that's the case, but I have noticed it's more prevalent. Having been here and been in other places, the outcry over some public works thing that is desired to be built, the outcry over that seems to be higher with some of the sort of middle and upper middle class people in a state like Vermont, as opposed to a state where there's less of an income disparity. It'd be the same as San Francisco. Can you imagine people are spending millions of dollars on a row house? And you say, well, we want to put an addiction treatment center on this block. Everyone around that block will cry bloody murder because they look at their home as like, oh, well, it's worth millions of dollars. It'll only be worth $10 if you put this place in because it'll be considered blighted or something like that. Part of it boils down to economics, and land values in Vermont happen to be high, so you get a lot of this. Somebody's like, yeah, I'm living here now, but ultimately, like, if I want to retire to Florida or something, I want to get a good amount of money for my land. The problem is that under Vermont's sort of legalese, it's actually relatively easy for people to drag the state or the township through court and prevent them from doing things. They didn't even do that to one another. We've got cases in this state, someone wants to like hook up renewable energy on their home, and one of their neighbors cries foul, and they drag them through court for years, and they have to pay all sorts of money just to wage a fucking legal battle. Usually they just say screw it, and they let the issue go. Okay, I guess I don't get my solar cells. I guess I can't put this little windmill in my backyard. You know, it's not bothering anyone. It's not scarifying the view.
I had to laugh because I watched him the other day when I realized he was drinking freaking Red Bull. But he started out by opening it up right next to the... I'll do this in this other window. He got real close to his microphone. He went...
I can't do this. I can't plant this tree. I can't cut that tree down. And then the state gets involved, and it's almost worse. You find some threatened species on your property. You're supposed to tell the state, oh yeah, there's like lady slippers growing on the little swampy patch in my backyard. Yeah, you probably shouldn't tell them. They might declare your property an endangered creature habitat and tell you what you can and can't do there. And so people in New England tend to be a little bit more closed off about their personal lives, maybe to people around them. They don't like these ostentatious shows of, hey, I've got green energy or something like that. And part of that is just the polite northern New England culture, very English and French extraction, as opposed to some of the other groups culturally that amalgamated into U.S. culture. But it can be a problem, a big problem, when you're trying to tackle the opiate crisis. When you're trying to tackle, are we going to have green energy? Are we going to treat sewage? It's even like Vermont Yankee. Most of the people complaining about it were in that general region. I happen to take their side. I don't think nuclear power is a good idea. I see it as basically you're sitting next to a ticking time bomb if there's any form of instability, and it ends up melting down. Maybe a fully modern style plant would have been fine. This thing was leaking tritium into the waterways. And a lot of people just came out and said, oh, don't worry, it's not a health risk. The plant leaks constantly and has like old wooden framing inside of the exhaust system and everything else. Don't worry about any of these things. Like, you're totally fine. Here, we're handing out iodine to everyone who lives nearby, but don't get nervous at all. It was a problem. But then there's the not in my backyard sort of thing. And it's particularly prevalent among those who are the haves as opposed to the have-nots. I like to think that because I was raised below the poverty line, even though now I'm doing well, if somebody were to say we want an addiction treatment center in the Styx-Hexenhammer neck of the woods, I wouldn't oppose it. So, okay, who cares? Who cares? There are probably people in the neighborhood that are already addicted to painkillers anyway. Why am I going to fucking care? If there's more than 100 people in an area, even according to the relatively low-balling statistics, there should be 1 or 2 of them that are on opiates at any given time. At least. It's probably a lot higher. And then you got these other drugs that you have to talk about too. I remember one time, I won't say where, but I will say it was many years ago. When I was in the woods, actually. Again, I won't say specifically where. I ran across like a duffel bag that had it had bags that had obviously at one point contained cocaine, spoons, and little packets that I assume had to do with heroin, pill bottles that had the labels ripped off, weed bags and stuff with just the stems left, and things like that. It's like somebody was having quite a party out here, probably for a long period of time. By the way, this particular location was completely overrun by Irene, so that gives you an idea of how many years ago this was. So it's no longer extant. As far as I know, nobody's toking up crack out there anymore. But you run across these things. People just hide their habits, and you wouldn't necessarily know. It's not like they're going to the census comes by and they say, "Are you addicted to opiates?" "Oh yeah, I'm an opiate addict." "Yeah, you can go tell the state police that I shoot heroin constantly." Like, they're gonna do that. You don't have enough trust and cooperation. And the not in my backyard people, when they sort of stigmatize those that have problems, it doesn't improve the situation at all. Not even remotely. And then they ramble. It's coming from all of these like gated community trust funders are the ones harping on the fact that Vermont needs to install more green energy, and then when you propose that it be anywhere near them, they don't want it. We've got some solar panels in this area of the state. I think there are 3 solar fields now just in the metro area. And it doesn't seem that most people oppose them, but I can remember when they wanted to put in the solar field that's sort of behind the McDonald's on Route 4, which is sort of a little bit out of the way of the center of the city, and there aren't as many people there. It's mostly a commercial area, so people don't really live there. Some people were putting up a stink about it, some of the businesses. And this was an empty, like a vacant lot that they were using. They're saying, well, it's basically, at this point, it's been vacant forever. It's blighted. We're not using it for anything. Why don't we turn it into a solar field? And there were people that didn't want them to do that. It's behind several businesses. They can't even really see it readily from most parts of the road. It's not disturbing anybody. It's next to like another empty area that's basically just like swamp. And some people didn't want it there. They didn't want to see solar panels for some reason. I think they should just pay people to mount them on the roofs, like they should subsidize that, so we don't have to make actual solar fields. They should have turned the vacant lots into like little parks or something like that. Turn it into an orchard. Let people come and eat some apples or something. You know, you wouldn't have a problem. The homeless population of Rowland, which is larger now since the recession, why don't you plant them a nice orchard so they can get some fresh fruit or something like that? Wouldn't that be a kind thing to do? And then you put the solar panels on the business roofs. Well, they're problem solved, and during a blackout, they can still marginally operate. That's really going to help people. Like, what if you have some massive problem, some disaster, you get like thousands of injured, and the hospital gets overwhelmed and nobody else has power? Well, then you have some places where you can temporarily set up shop if you really, really need to, like in Walmart or something like that. It just works. It's a good thing to do. It's like some people, they assume like I'm far right, so I must like oppose green energy. And no, absolutely not on either count. I support green energy. I just think it's being used in a dumb fashion. And the NIMBY folks ultimately wouldn't be able to do much about like solar if you were just having it installed on like existing business roofs and stuff like that, because it wouldn't be an eyesore. It's just establishing something totally innocuous on an existing structure. It doesn't take up any extra room. The business feels good about things. It's certainly going to help with tourism. Because they say, oh, Green City Burlington, Green City Rutland, stuff like that. It just works. But the NIMBY folks, they try to get in the way of anything they can. They want every social reform known to man, especially if it ups the tax rate. But when push comes to shove, they don't want to allocate funds if the site's anywhere near them. Oh, you're gonna put up this power station. That's good. We keep having brownouts. Oh, you're putting it up within a mile of where I live. I don't want to see that shit. I don't want to have to drive by the transformers every day. Oh, windmills? Yeah, that's good. Green energy, #1. Oh, you're putting it... I can see it from my backyard? Hell no. Now, I'm going to sue the state because I don't want to see it. Put it in someone else's community, and in every community they go to, they find that there are these not in my backyard sort of folks. It's just sort of the way that it works. And it's prevalent in Vermont, I think, based on my understanding of sort of the people that tend to be in the upper crust of Vermont. A lot of them aren't from Vermont originally. They come from some other community, and they feel like, well, I've made it, and now I'm in nice scenic Vermont, so I don't want to have to see the windmills in the treatment center or something like that. I like to think that the average Vermonter is more open-minded, honestly, than that. That's about all. Peace out.
Second one. I'm gonna check a listen to this.
As they say, it's good enough for government work, right? This is a song called Straighten Up and Fly Right.
After I got a new banjo. I'll be right back.
Everything was on display. The boss tried to dump the monkey off his back. Monkey grabbed his neck, says, "You listen, Jack. Straighten up and fly right. Straighten up and stay right. Straighten up and fly right. Ain't cool down, Papa, don't blow that top. What's the use in driving? Ain't no use in diving. Straighten up and fly right. Say cool down, Papa, don't blow that top. Buzz told the monkey you were choking me. Won't you release your hold and I will set you free. Monkey looked the buzzer right dead in the eye. He said, "The story's so touching, but it sounds like a lie. Won't you straighten up and fly right? Straighten up and stay right. Straighten up and fly right. Say cool down, Papa, don't blow that top down." Straighten up and fly right. Straighten up and stay right. Straighten up and fly right. Cool down, Papa, don't blow that top. What's the use in driving? Ain't no use in diving. Straighten up and fly right. I said, cool down, Papa, don't blow that top. Buzzer told the monkey, "You were choking me. Won't you release your hold and I will set you free." Well, the monkey looked the buzzer right dead in the eye. He said, "The story's so touching, but it sounds like a lie. Won't you straighten up and fly right? Straighten up and stay right there. Straighten up and fly right. Say, cool down, Papa, don't blow your top. Fly right." Thank you. All right, on. Another cover coming in. Watching it come on, come on, come on, come on,
next one? We're into the stream here. This is 3
All right,
PC
everyone,
content
it's time for the
uploaded
big
today
news of
by
the day,
this
which
one
is
YouTuber.
Jeff Sessions being implicated by the Russian envoy there as having
And in many days, this guy uploads 5, 6, 7 videos.
discussed
He also has a VidMe channel.
campaign, the Trump campaign with him some time ago, I believe back in April and May. And so everyone's up in arms like Sessions must be fired. I agree, actually. I would love to see Sessions fired, and I think I know what's going on here. Does anybody else find it slightly odd that this happens the day after Trump and Sessions make that uncomfy appearance? And Sessions says, no, I'm not resigning. And Trump says, well, I regret installing him as Attorney General. I kind of regret it because of this. And he uses the probe as an excuse. Oh, he shouldn't have recused himself. But I think it's more he's embarrassed by Jeff Sessions. Because Sessions, unbeknownst to him, was a drug warrior and in favor of like the civil asset forfeiture stuff. I don't think that's Trump. I think that's Sessions shooting at the hip. And Trump is looking for an excuse to get rid of him. I think that this Russian envoy is speaking up specifically because of that. I think that the two things are linked. Now, in a way they're linked, I suppose your theory behind that depends on whether you think Trump is a Russian asset or not. If you do, probably what you're thinking is, aha, this is either evidence that everyone around Trump is colluding with Russia, or this is evidence that Trump is pulling a string with this envoy to get rid of Sessions because he fucking hates him. And he has a decent relationship with Putin. It's like the extra meeting that Trump had with Putin with just the interpreter. And everyone said, oh, this is Nixonian. This is like Watergate all over it. What's in his job? Is it not in the president's job description to talk to foreign leaders? What difference does it really make if it's just an interpreter there or if there are a bunch of other people there? Why does it explicitly matter unless you assume that Trump is like, oh, yeah, here's some state secrets you can take back to the Kremlin to analyze or something. You have to assume that there's wrongdoing to really care about that. If Obama had a private, undisclosed meeting just with an interpreter with Vladimir Putin, would anybody be worried? No, nobody would have cared at the time. Certainly not the people harping on this issue, but that's because there was never the assumption that he was a Russian asset. Then Kim.com comes out and says, oh, CrowdStrike, that sort of DNC op group, is actually Guccifer, and had these leaks had nothing to do with Russia. They were like from within the Democratic Party or some bullshit like that. And I kind of believe him. I'm not sure that Kim.com is the most reliable source of information in the world, because he's come up short several times. But on the Guccifer issue, he seems to be probably telling the truth. And all this fusion GPS nonsense and everything else that's gone on. I think the real story is that the DNC is embroiled in about a dozen different leaks and scandals. Not that Trump is working hand in hand with Russian espionage agents. But I think my own feeling is probably Trump is looking for a reason to get rid of Sessions, and that this envoy is essentially being helpful. Another possibility. What would Trump do if he knows that the media is going to headhunt after him? Would he really care if other people around him are implicated in Russian connections, as long as he knows that he himself is not able to be implicated because he's not working with them? What if it's a deep state op? Have you considered the possibility that Trump is an intelligence asset and that the U.S. intelligence community is trying to weed out Russians from the government, people who are connected with Russia from the government, by getting Trump to get in and be chummy with them, by pretending to be dumb? You know, Trump, you're a good actor. Run for president. Get it. We'll ensure that happens. We need to purge a bunch of Russians from the higher levels of government, people that are feeding info to the Kremlin, because we know that there are moles and spies at the highest levels. There have to be, because of, you know, the info that they've obtained, that we know that they've obtained. So you get in there. You know all these politicians. You know kind of who's corrupt.
FPS
Get info on them, and then we'll expose them one by one. By the way, don't worry about getting impeached or anything, because obviously you're working for us, not for the Russians.
Or not quite.
Has anyone thought of this possibility, that Trump is purging the government of foreign assets or something along those lines?
I might have to go back
Weirder
to
things have
25
happened.
or,
I'm not speculating that that's the case. I'm putting that forward as an interesting alternative to the idea that Trump is working with Russia. Because so far we have situations where everyone around Trump seems to be connected with Russia, His own son appears to have talked with him, although that would be part of the op. It wouldn't touch his family. Sessions and Flynn and all these others. And yet, not once, in months and months of investigation and leaks, have we gotten a single shred of evidence that Trump ever did anything wrong with regards to Russia. We have the Russian envoy saying Sessions discussed things inappropriately with him. You know, in the wake of Trump saying he regrets appointing him AG in the first place. How can he continue on as AG if the President of the United States that appointed him regrets the appointment? How can he continue on in that capacity? He needs to resign. If he doesn't resign, they need to get rid of him as quickly as possible. Sessions isn't even a good AG. He's pissing off a bunch of Republicans too. Not just the never Trumpers. He's pissed off Trump too. He certainly pisses me off with the drug war bullshit that's not going to work, spends a lot of money on nothing. How is he going to get anyone to work with him? He doesn't have any friends. It doesn't make any sense. Eric Holder comes out and rakes him over the coals over civil asset forfeiture. Now that's half fake news. It's like half true news, because he's really talking about cartel members and stuff like that, but it's not a good look. Even bringing it up in a positive light doesn't make sense. You should be scaling it back further, in all honesty anyway. It shouldn't even be a thing that the government uses. Unless it's going to go into a collective pot to reduce the fees and taxes associated with policing, in which case it's okay if you hold off on the drug war side and you're not using civil asset forfeiture on people who are, you know, petty larceny or something. It's like right now, you act let's say you get a bunch of money on you because, you know, you're going to buy a car in cash or something, or whatever under the sun. And some cop just randomly profiles you, stops you, and says, oh, you got a lot of money on you, I'm seizing this. So there's no legal recourse in some states for that situation. Some states have basically banned the practice, and I applaud them. Others have severely restricted it. That's good. In some states, it's still in full force. Like, the cop can basically steal your wallet, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's a legalized theft in those states. And rather than point that out and say, yeah, this lower-end civil asset forfeiture is a problem, Jeff Sessions applauds the overall idea and wants to expand it on the upper level without doing anything to address the 99% of the time it probably has nothing to do with actual criminality. Like, someone has $100 on them, gets stopped for having a gram of weed. Does that mean that that's weed money? No, it doesn't, quite clearly. And Sessions apparently thinks that it does, or something like that. And then we have this weird situation where the day after he's sparring with the president that appointed him, we have this story. This has Trump written all over it. I think Trump is involved with this story coming out in some way. I have to assume he's involved. The other possibility people haven't mentioned, I haven't seen this posted about anywhere, like even among the alt media. What if this is the idea of the Russians' idea of a funny joke, just to screw with Trump? Like, they're trolling him and they're trolling the United States to say, as Envoy said before, now there was no inappropriate commentary in the Sessions meeting with him. They just talked about mundane things, but now we're going to say, haha, this is going to be funny. Oh, listen to this one. The KGB would be proud. We're going to say that he discussed the campaign just to stir the pot over there in the United States. Because Putin would love the idea of Trump being sort of disarmed and ineffectual and incapable of working with Congress because of the Russian bullshit. This actually benefits the Russians in a way because it diplomatically strangulates the United States and makes the president, the primary diplomat of the country and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, look weak. It keeps people from working with him. It keeps his approval low, which keeps people demoralized, both his fans and his adversaries that can't impeach him, and it plays to Russia's benefit. It lets him conduct diplomacy more easily because there aren't as many people that can stand in their way. But nobody wants to talk about the possibility that it's a bunch of Dems and never-Trumpers and like establishmentarians that have been working with the Russians, and Trump's trying to purge them from out of the government. Nobody wants to talk about that possibility. What if Trump is actually like the savior of the republic, basically? And all this stuff is really a smokescreen, and he's trying one by one to get rid of these people. Like, Jeff Sessions was already in government. What if Trump knew he was corrupt, so he's like, oh, I need him close to me so I can get rid of him by playing this stupid game that the media plays and my adversaries of I must be a Russian agent. Well, I'll give him something to think about, because if people speculate that Trump is working with Russia and it comes out that the envoy was talking to Sessions, Doesn't that immediately become a lightning rod for front page news? Isn't it the best way to purge Sessions from his position altogether? Not just as the AG, but also in Congress. It gets rid of him. It gets rid of somebody who maybe is dishonest. Maybe he's corrupt and Trump set him up. Now, go talk to that envoy over there, Jeff. And then he whispers to the envoy, okay, you know what to do.
And
maybe the envoy is a U.S. asset.
That last thing he said, that might sound a little bit like, what is it, Trump, the 4D chess player? That might sound a bit like that. But bear with us here. Bear with this guy. This guy might have it right because James Comey was pretty much left to be in position, even though Trump was totally within his rights to fire him right away once he got in there. I guess he needed to have a bit of an excuse. But Comey really gave him a pretty big excuse.
Have you ever thought of this is some spy versus spy stuff. Have you thought of the possibility of this envoy is working for the U.S. and doesn't have any Russian loyalty at all? Like, it just happens to be in the Kremlin. Like, it's one of our agents operating in Russia. Maybe Putin should think about that. Maybe he's the one being played. That'd be funny. It's not beyond the realm of possibility. Do we not have intel agencies working with like a fucking 100 other intel agencies in the world? You'd think that we would know what's going on. If somebody noble and benevolent knows what's going on, maybe they finally decided to take steps to weed out all the traitors and infiltrators. Maybe that's what's happening. There are all sorts of possibilities. It goes way beyond, oh, Trump is a Russian asset, so he surrounds himself with people who say inappropriate things to the Russian envoy. I think somebody like Trump, with his specific set of talents, is not given over to making such elementary mistakes. I don't think so. He has to be a decent judge of character to be able to delineate power to other people, to manage business. He does that for 40 friggin' years. And suddenly, because he becomes the president, he's no longer capable of exercising that skill. Like, everything that he knows goes out the window because he happens to be the president. I'm not so sure that that's logical. I think that he's still very much in command of the situation. Whether or not he's the only one calling the shots remains to be seen. You could also think, well, maybe Trump is doing this, but he's corrupt. He's purging good people from, like, government positions. Okay, you name that as a possibility. Based on my reading of him, based on my estimation of who Donald Trump is, I think that he's the good guy in the situation. And I think it goes deeper than most. I don't think we'll ever be able to see how deep it goes, because it probably involves top secret sort of maneuvering. It's probably a U.S. op to purge foreign elements from the government, essentially. That's I believe that that's possibly what's happening. It explains everything. It explains how surreal the election was. It explains the DNC's actions. It explains everything.
Well, the surreality of the election, and I'm not an American, is the fact that the polling was clearly off, and this guy also pointed that out back in the day.
What if it's a bipartisan op to purge foreign elements from the government? You know, working with the CIA or something. Just think about that for a while. That's about all. Peace out.
Closing all the leaks. That kind of makes sense.
All right, everyone. The flag of empire is once again flying in the breeze because it's time for a little bit of conquest. I have a little bit of a bone to pick with the developers and moderators of VidMe, and I need your help to conquer their site, become the #1 creator there. I'm apparently #4 already, and only a few thousand followers behind people like Computing Forever. I think he got there early on, dragged a huge proportion of his audience there, so he's #1. I like his content, by the way. Kudos to him for making continuously decent content, especially on like tech free speech. Really good stuff. You should follow him too. But I'm asking for an army of subscribers here to help charge into the fray and change the minds of VidMe. Here's my thing. Consider it from my point of view, and then I'll go into what actually happened, why I'm making this video. And this is an exclusive for YouTube.
Frame rate.
From my mind, if YouTube has no significant competition in any real sense from any other video hosting site, there's no pressure on them to really care about any individual creator beyond the money that they can make from them. Which means that, of course, if they don't like your kind of content or a class of content, they're not going to think too much about shoving you to the side, demoting your content, kicking you off YouTube. Now, I don't worry about that because my stuff mostly is innocuous anyway. Like, who cares if I talk about occult books? YouTube's not going to care. But here's the problem. What happened is I got a message from one of the moderators on VidMe. Now, preface to this is that the news and politics category, and I think this is a huge strategic blunder holding VidMe back, is blocked from trending, going to the hot page on VidMe itself. That is, even if it's more popular than most of the videos that are there that are on trending, it's never going to get there because it's in the wrong category. I get a message saying I'd miscategorized several videos as brain food when they should have gone under news and politics, and threatening to unverify me if I continued. Now, unverification means I would have a capped file size and length limit on my uploads in a certain amount per day, which means I wouldn't be able to use VidMe. I do long-form content, and one file alone would take up the data storage amount probably. I'd have to cut that in half in order to make it fit the length requirements, and it'd be pointless. And they're saying this to me, apparently one of their top 10 creators. So I have a little bit of a problem with that. The real problem, though, is that the category system isn't even fully made clear. And I've made a video, link in the description. You should go there. Once you're on there, you should upvote it if you're joining VidMe. And there is good content on VidMe. I have no problem with the platform itself. It's pretty good. In my video, I explain, well, if it fits under multiple categories, why would I be threatened with unverification for putting it under the one that wasn't automatically demoted off of trending? Like otherwise, I'm just talking to an echo chamber with all of my content, because everyone that's there following me is either solely interested already in politics, and then VidMe, because it demotes that content, it's not advertising it to the outside world at all. So that's a small audience, or it's people who already follow me. I want them to stop doing this. I think it's a bad idea from a marketing standpoint. And seeing VidMe grow would be a good thing. It benefits me, it benefits everyone using the platform, and it provides a more stable competitor to YouTube that maybe they start keeping in mind. Yeah, we probably shouldn't piss off large swaths of people. We should keep the changes more mundane, be more fair, so that people don't potentially go to another platform that might actually be economically viable. That's my reason for it. So if you support, I mean, you might not even really care about VidMe, you should still be supporting its existence enough to care about its categorization system. In a roundabout way, it affects the wider video hosting of the internet at large. The same is true with all the other prior sites that tried to be YouTube alternatives. They all make the same mistakes over time. They become paid only, or they stop allowing uploads. They have some fiscal problem. VidMe hasn't had those problems yet, apparently. They raised a lot of money. Their problem is they're holding themselves back. Well, it's about time we break that bottleneck, and I think that we can do it with a concerted effort. We need more people to speak out, and I would also like to say, anyone else, you're already on VidMe, you should make a video against it too. Yeah, come join me. Let's conquest. I want to get to #1 on there, just for ego's sake alone. It'd be funny, even if it's only for a while, just to be the top content creator on what is now at least a second-tier video platform. It's up there with Vimeo or Dailymotion. It's gone already beyond a lot of the more minor sites. It's already more stable and more used than any of those. It's up there with these larger YouTube alternatives, some of which it took them 10 years to get that size. That's really good. But that growth will eventually stall out if they keep discriminating against the political content. So I want your help in changing their minds. Also, I mean, the larger the channel is, the less likely it is they'll unverify it. I like having a second-placed upload. I could pay Vimeo to upload a bunch of content, but VidMe's free and should remain free. I mean, they're capable of funding it. It's not that difficult. A lot of these sites, they just they overextend, I think. They overestimate how popular they'll be. They make too much of an investment, they fall flat. Then they have to recoup, and they start jettisoning people. They have to die out, or they stagnate, something like that. They have this continuous problem. It would be nice if VidMe took up more of the approach of Gab. That is more pro-liberty, as sort of the alternative to the lame stream content that's getting promulgated even here on YouTube.
Uploads here, but sometimes
when's the last time you saw, you know, Molyneux trending on YouTube? You probably haven't recently, but you've seen CNN there. A video that has 1/100th the actual views on it and gets massively downvoted goes to trending. A video that's much more well-received with a huge audience behind it that's watched it and shared around and goes totally viral never actually gets there. It's the opposite of common sense. So we need to change their minds. So I'm asking for a little bit of imperialism on VidMe here. Oh, it'd be so funny to try to see their reactions. That's about all. Peace out.
And that's it. Let me switch over here. And that ends like the mid-afternoon stream. thank you for watching. I'm probably going to be doing some other odds and ends here to get some other scenes ready to switch to, things that I can do when I'm streaming other than listening to music or watching a YouTube video. Do like this idea though. I could watch YouTube videos that I likely am going to be commenting on in the comment form, and rather than leaving a text comment, I could do it via the live stream for maybe a week or so just to see how this works. I really like that idea, having commentary put into a live stream version so that someone could later take a clip of it and respond to it like a video reply. Seeing as YouTube got rid of the video replies such a long time ago,